Hello, everyone, and welcome. The Native Arts and Cultures Foundation offers that. Acknowledgement is a simple, powerful way of showing respect and a step toward correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous people's history and culture, and toward inviting and honoring the truth. As a department, we wish to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous communities native to this region and recognize that Indiana University Bloomington is built on Indigenous homelands and resources. We recognize the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee people as past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We encourage everyone to engage with contemporary communities, to learn the histories of this land, to look at who has and who does not have access to its resources, and to examine your own place, abilities, and obligations within this process of reparative work that is necessary to promote a more equitable and socially just IU Bloomington. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. That's Professor Jenny McKnight, who heads our acting program here. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to share quickly that it is a commitment that we have made as a department some years ago, particularly around 2019, 2020, 2020, to always have a land acknowledgement whenever there is an activity or event in one of our incredible spaces. I will talk more about why we do that in just a moment. But first, I'd like to thank Jenny for this. I would like to thank those that have been a part of getting this together, this memorial, which is being live streamed. So thank you to those of you on YouTube live streaming today, or who will watch this later. I want to thank Maddie Lechner, who's up on the booth, for being the brainchild behind and the real organizer of doing all the hard work for this, getting this together, and the tremendous work she's done in getting the histories and collecting histories so that we could present some things today. I also want to just thank our regular, most amazing people. I see Trish and Betsy, lighting and production management back there. Thank you very much as well. Oh, yeah, see, we've got, what is the most exciting thing today? As I almost hesitated to start because there's so many old friends here together and a lot of people that I haven't seen. I'd like to acknowledge alumni that are here today, alumni that a few I've met and some I've never met. I'd also like to acknowledge current and past faculty. I'm so grateful Marilyn Norris is here with us today. So I would like to also acknowledge that the Executive Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Rick Van Kooten, is here. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, which is probably most of you, my name is Linda Pisano. I'm a professor of costume design. I started here in 2002, and I stayed and raised children here, and worked here and designed. And I have been chair since fall of 2018, and I am stepping down at the end of this June. After 8 years of a very eventful pandemic and a new change in laws and all kinds of things. But I would like to say, and I don't know where he is, Ansley Valentine, where is your man? He's outside. I just want to let you know that he's the incoming chair as of July 1st. So I'm just going to say a few words and then I'm going to turn it over to faculty that I had the honor to work with, but also they have the honor to be very close to and work with those who we are honoring and celebrating today. are Keith Michael, Marion Bankert Michael, and Robbie Stanton. I can't believe it. This is just the opening, and I'm already struggling to get through. So I do want to bring your attention to the reception area up in the back. So after you leave here, you go to the reception, and I just wanted to share a few things that are in the artifacts. I also did want to note that we had a loss of alum that I know many of you know, so I do want to mention Delta Long, who passed away this past autumn. And a very important, well, all alum are important, but he stayed very active with the department right up into last year, and we're really grateful for that. And if anyone wants to take over the alumni social media pages, please let us know, because that's what Doug did. And so in the artifacts, you will see a couple of things. You'll see, I'll start with Robbie. There's a clear showcase up there that has some of his work. You'll see 2 books, and it's important not to look at what the topic of the books are. It's important to look that I open them to the page that have inscriptions on them. And one is from Professor Leon Bronner, and the other is from Professor Wes Peters. And those were his 2 mentors when he was a student here. And one of the things that they did, they gave books always were to students. And one of the things that Robbie and I kept in our legacy in the costume area is on opening nights, we always give our students books to build their library. Even in today's day where you can buy them on Kindle, we don't do that. We give the actual hard copy books. So yeah. And our libraries are right up the street. Also up there in that showcase are as Robbie got older, and he started having more and more difficulty with his motor skills in terms of the tailoring and draping and cutting. Keep in mind that Robbie and I worked almost every day together since 2002, and he was very important. And I'll share something in a moment, but back to the artifacts. In order to work on his fine motor skills, he took up weaving and beading. And he was the king of reduce, reuse, recycle. And so what you'll see are beads that have just fallen off of vintage things, and he's built them back together into these exquisite beaded bags. You'll also find that he was a designer and an artist in his own right. And so I put out a watercolor of a landscape that I found in his belongings. And there's many of them. And I was struck because those were very private, and he had never shared all those landscapes with me. There's just a number of things. And that last thing I'll bring your attention to that's an artifact of Robbie's is that he was knitting and weaving something. And it was left in his home, and you can still see the needles where he was in the middle of working on this project. And I will never take those needles out of that project. Anyway, so those are up there. And then the reason that you'll see a lot of images of our building and the reason that the land acknowledgement is also important at this time is because this building this beautiful building, see, it even has stars. This beautiful building we are in is because of our Keith and Marion. Their passion and love of people. I know that I'm gonna slaughter Shakespeare here. It's there never was a story of woe like Juliet and her Romeo. People always refer to that as like the love story of all time. But I think if someone had written Keith and Marion's love story, that would be it. They had such passion for what they did, what they believed theater could do, as teachers, as mentors, as artists in their own right. I mean, Keith was a scenic designer, a historian, a director. He did everything. And Marion. She was amazing. She could do anything. And I learned very quickly, and I want to share my personal, before I turn this over to Dale, my personal experience of showing up in 2002. Remember, Keith and Marion were not here. They were in Bloomington, but not on faculty anymore, retired for some time. And I went into Howard Jensen, who a lot of you remember, is still on faculty. Yes, please. Howard Jensen, who still supports, just by the way, all of our Shakespeare's and pre-19th century plays. So Midsummer Night's Dream tonight is because of the Howard Jensen endowment. Just wanted to say that. His legacy lives on. We will always be doing pre-19th century classic works because of Howard Jensen. So I went into Howard Jensen and said, my first year, naive, young tenured, and said, hey, I want to teach in London. I want to study abroad. He goes, oh, well, come on over because we need to talk to Keith and Marion. So Howard, Keith and Marion went to London all the time and had a flat there, and they would, see shows and everything. And hours upon hours, I engaged with them. And my entire class that I teach, 22 years this year, my entire class that I teach is founded on the principles and the places and the ideas that they set forward. And when I showed up and I'm not saying this because we're trying to make a statement, but I was the only female on faculty here for a few years. When I got here, we had some amazing people, like, of course, Marilyn and Pat, if you remember Pat, your secretary. And I think that Marion knew that I needed some companionship. So she invited me to something I'd never heard of called a hen party. And she had all the women of the department and her and all the women of theater and wives of professors and partners of professors there. And I think some of you were there. I believe some of the faculty are here today. Maybe Sherry was there. And it was amazing to have that kind of welcome. All right. So this was the kind of people they were. You know them as your colleagues. I know them as colleagues. We know them as your mentors. Their legacy is going to be forever in this building. I hope that you'll take time to look at that. There's a quote that it's Christopher Marlowe. Sorry, I was trying to remember. It's Christopher Marlowe, and it's from a poem he wrote in 1598. And it's honor is purchased by the deeds we do. And so every time I think about Keith and Marion, and I can't go a day without thinking about them because I'm in this building almost every day. This is the legacy. And as we have a land acknowledgement for the long history of Indigenous people who have been here, we also have a legacy of two amazing teachers of theater, two thespians, not to be corny, but two amazing scholars and artists of theater. And their legacy is carved in limestone right here on the IU campus, and I'm so grateful to be a part of that. We're so grateful for Professor Emeritus Dale McFadden, who will give a eulogy for Keith and Marion, and hopefully a few remarks because he knew the others and knew Robbie well as well. And then Professor Emeritus George Pinney, sorry, I'm losing my mind, or just aging him. And who will speak to his long friendship with Robbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. It's good to see everybody, including the everybody's I don't know. Because that means there is a long, long relationship that we've all had with Keith and Marion and Robbie, and I think Doug Long. And they've positively influenced all of us. I did keep in touch with Doug, by the way. That was a 40-year relationship. And I had seen him last year at the Film Noir Festival in Chicago. And we'd exchanged information about books on Hollywood that we were reading or trying to read. So I do want to spend also a little time talking about Robbie before we're talking about Marion and Keith. Robbie was an accomplished, kind, highly patient designer, teacher, and costume shop manager. He would be a millionaire if he had $1 for every actor during costume fitting who said, I plan to lose weight. And Robbie would kindly say, okay, just let me know. He also had his hands full with directors. So I will just talk about how I kept his hands full. On one particular occasion, back in the Brown County days, Robbie was designing and still managing, and I was doing a production of Picnic. And in Picnic, there are 12 actors, and one actor is wearing glasses. Well, I decided that before we started production, 2 actors would wear glasses. So in opening week, I wasn't worrying enough. So, with directors, you never know in technique what they're going to pick on. They could pick on the costumes, they could pick on props, they could pick on the set. I picked on glasses. So I decided that in a cast of 12, I wanted 6 actors to have glasses. So Robbie said, okay, no problem. This was the second dress rehearsal. We opened in 2 days. So he was ahead of me. The next night, he brought out glasses for the whole cast. When I calmed down and we went back to having just 2 pairs of glasses, it became a great running joke. For years after, whenever I was doing a production, if Robbie was designing or not, he'd say, Dale, how many pairs of glasses do you need? And I would say, well, let's start with 2. If it gets worse, I'll let you know. And he would sometimes put in the report for the evening to the stage manager, ask Dale how many pairs of glasses he needs. So we kept our funny secret going for a long, long time. He was a kind person who was great to work with. My wife Sherry and I knew Marion and Keith for 40 years, since the time I was hired by the department, also during Keith and Marion's retirement and our own retirement. And we all know that Marion and Keith were passionate about theater, about people, and about living. As you know, they loved to share their tales about traveling and the productions they had seen. And they loved to share their time with international students, which I was not that aware of. They had a whole relationship with people, other students on campus outside of theater. And they made efforts, great efforts, to nurture the best in all of us. They really did believe that we had the best in us that they could help draw out. And I must also mention a fine art collection they had. I was talking to Randy Pope before we began tonight, and boy, the Robert Motherwell, the Henry Moore, and the other things that they collected over the years. There were a couple of times in Chicago on a recruitment trip that they'd be looking at some Edward Hoppers, and they knew their stuff. You may have known that Keith was an art major as an undergraduate. He was also a highly effective chairperson. And I do believe that all of his faculty members, Rob and others who were hired early on, Dennis, etc., all of us, Keith believed the best in us and he expected the best of us. Because he was very good in difficult decisions, at making difficult decisions. And he would do that, I think, fairly and quickly, and you didn't have to know what he thought about the situation. Marion was our voice and speech teacher, and she was our vocal coach for all the productions during the year in Brown County. She was very good as a teacher, but she also was involved in the welfare of our students, not interfering in their lives, but wanting to know how they were doing. And that's a testament to some of you here today who had long-standing relationships with Marion after you graduated. I do want to mention an IRDA adventure or two. IRDA was our group association for recruiting graduate students in acting and directing. And Marion and I would go to Chicago and to New York, and mostly Chicago. Now look, we did all the work, but other things went on. I was usually the designated cocktail companion. So usually it was bourbon, but one year it was White Russians. And I'm sure I'm along for the ride, sure. And that was about a phase for about 2 years. And that would be after all the work was done, and we would then get our students together. She was very good at recruitment. And on one particular occasion, we called a student back who had some tick in his voice. And Marion said, I think he has a medical problem. So she talked to the student and she said, you let her see a doctor. And 2 weeks later, a student who we did not recruit here thanked her and said, because of you, I saw a doctor and this was precancerous in my throat. And because, voice and speech teachers also have some interest in the medical background of their students. So that was quite impressive. I have one other story about you didn't have to know what Marion really thought. We were in Chicago one year, and Marion was on the patent lecture committee. It's a committee here on campus, and people are brought in. There were no cell phones. Marion was in charge of this lecturer coming in, who will remain anonymous, except he was a former ambassador to the Soviet Union. Okay, so we left for Chicago, and we were a little delayed because Marion had to take another call. And she said, this is the third time he's changed the dates. So we get to Chicago, and then there's another call. Oh, now he wants, I don't know what he wants, something else, maybe the bottled water this room, I don't know. And then she had a fifth call, and she said she finally got it settled, and he ended by saying, well, I hope you know what you're doing. And then she hung up and she said, that man is a horse's ass. So to this day, and I won't mention his name, whenever I hear his name, I always put in his middle name, which is name. One other quick story. Marion and Keith were impressive at fighting each other because they were always so civil. There was a play called The Flowering Peach. It was a Clifford Odets play that later was the musical I Do, I Do. And Keith was going on about this play, and he said, we saw The Flowering Peach, and it was great. And Marion said, Keith, it's not called The Flowering Peach. Okay, Marion. Then he went on with the story, and this went on, and then the second time, Keith, it's not called The Flowering Peach, right, Marion? So then finally, he said, yeah, that's what it's called. And Marion just said, no, it's not. It's something else. And they just stayed at like on scale of 10, stayed at 3 the whole time. It was very impressive. It never got resolved. I searched high and low to find that other title, which I'm sure that existed and that Marion was right. And they were just on their best behavior because we were with, this went on for about 2 hours. Keith would keep bringing it up and Marion just keep, no, Keith, that's not what it is. We're all here today because the very positive influence they have had on the department and on all of us who knew them. And they will be remembered and cherished. Thank you.
First time I met Robbie was back in the fall of 1987 at the graduate faculty meeting to launch the school year. It was my freshman year. I walked into the theater building and I saw Robbie and the animated Wes Peters discussing some adventure with intense exuberance and many a chuckle. I followed them upstairs to a classroom right next to the office. The room was packed. All chairs taken, people sitting on radiators and leaning against walls. The room was hot with electric excitement. The proceedings were hosted and propelled by one and only Marilyn Norris. Who injected the atmosphere with her gigantic joy of living, with the story of the magic of theater and how her niece was magicked. I felt I had walked into a family of artists with the goal of advancing great theater and drama, a family where thoughts and ideas were shared and then expanded, not exploded. Robbie Stanton was a major contributor to the formation of this world. His costume shop was a beehive of inspired work and a center of creativity with the highest of standards, and most of all, a warm, welcoming place. The first year, I was amazed at the exquisite workmanship. From rendering to opening night, every detail considered and executed. The result, museum quality costumes that inspired the actor, elevated the dramatic action, and certainly thrilled audiences. Jen Sheshko wrote, Robbie taught me quality control. And I don't mean a willingness to ask if something looked good, but the skill and self-belief that answered that for myself. He built my critical thinking skills and how to question my process. Why do it that way? Try this way. Test, process, float the line between working through gut instinct and inspiration while also looking at something from a different angle. Robbie and I became fast friends. Okay. Yeah. We became so close and absolutely crazed collaborators. Creating musicals with Robbie was an adventure with highs, lows, and always with treasure joy. Scaling our ideas and concepts, Robbie was able to push the proverbial envelope while bringing me back down to earth and reality. For not only was Robbie a consummate artist, but he also possessed good common sense. I can still remember Howard Jensen railing that theater artists should have common sense. But oh, those ideas. We did a production of Pinney, which I had the idea that Berta, Pippin's grandmother, would make a grand entrance on a palanquin carried by 4 hunky bodybuilders. Robbie ran with the idea of creating costumes for 4 macho, big, muscular dudes. High in the air, the 4 beefcakes carried Berta in as she reigned and commanded them with heavy chains that were attached to dog collars around their thick necks. Their costumes were fanciful thongs with various accessories. They marched in facing the audience for obvious reasons. But oh, their exits. They did an about face, the audience gasped, then giggled, then guffawed. Oh, that was considered very daring back then. At intermission, 3 older women, theater circle members, approached me, and I thought, "You're in for it now, Pinney." "George, Robbie's costumes. Those are the best yet." Back to the academic. Robbie's right and left brain worked together like a quantum computer. He intrinsically calculated the cost, available workforce, hours of development and construction to realize the concept, putting the actor clothed on stage. His skill was truly challenged with his work with Star of Indiana that became Brass Theater, that was the genesis of Blast on Broadway. Not only did he create the costume designs for those early shows, but he oversaw and supervised the wardrobe with efficiency and aplomb. The wardrobe was for a cast of over 120. Imagine a drum and bugle corps transported from the football field to arenas, then to the main stage in Branson, Missouri. Not one costume piece missing, everything laundered for each performance, powered by Robbie's imaginative and practical solutions. The production staff and cast, they were beyond amazed, because Robbie certainly magicked them. Now, Robbie possessed perfect color perception. He was known for his expertise in color dyes and the dyeing of fabric. He worked as a dyer for such theaters as the Old Globe Theater, La Jolla Playhouse, and other regional theaters. As a member of IATSE Local 893, Robbie enjoyed working on many national tours, doing wardrobe and hair. He ventured into the Weavers Guild with magnificent beaded bags, as well as creating exquisite weaving, knitting, crocheting, anything with needles, yarn, thread, string, wire. I think invention was Robbie's middle name. And also, I was a little worried about my cat's hair as they would be shedding. But the most important aspect, truly the most important aspect of his work at IU was for the students. Every Sunday morning, Robbie and I would meet at the Y for our weekly bout with dumbbells. Oh, I'm sure there's a metaphor in there somewhere, but I digress. We would stretch first while laughing and giggling about this and that, and then bitching about that and this. Always, he would end these discussions with, "I do it for the students. I do it for the students." Any student who walked through the costume shop door, it didn't matter. Be it an actor for a fitting, a design student needing advice, or just the curious, Robbie was there to help in any fashion. From Ansley Valentine. I met Robbie when I was a graduate student. Even though I was there for directing, I spent a lot of time in the costume shop. He was always so wise and calm, funny, in a dry wit sort of way. He encouraged you to do your best, largely by example. He was diligent in his craft, and he helped me a lot when I was freelancing as a costume designer after IU. I bought one of his hand-beaded purses a couple of years ago because I wanted to always have something that showed his dedication to the craft. Amanda Bailey. Mostly, I think of Robbie being able to concentrate so hard in a shop full of kids that you could startle him by just asking a question. He was always a steady support in the process of sewing, designing, styling hair, and I always admired how he kept other artistic pursuits up in his own life, weaving, beading, and recovering chairs. From Ray Feldman. One of the happiest memories I have with Robbie, aside from the fun brand of East Coast gossip we shared, both being from New Jersey, was the time he outfitted me in my very first dress when I was conducting the Kit Kat Club band in that famous '94 production of Cabaret at the University Theater. We were on stage, of course, and I was in a blue and white polka dot number with a gorgeous wig and ample bosoms. I never felt more fabulous. Myself, I treasure my time with Robbie. His insight, incredible discipline, joy in the work, and being a true friend. And many times, I was a friend in need, and he would just smile He was selfless. Linda Pisano summed up his nature with these lovely statements. Robbie's personality was like the sugar-free Jolly Ranchers he always had on his desk. Delightful little moments of flavor to get you through the day. Robbie's dry humor aged like a fine wine. Those years before he retired, and just before the pandemic hit, I deeply cherished his biting humor. It brought levity and wisdom to an increasingly changing world. From Leon Bronner, Robbie was a good person, a good human being. He cared about others and he cared about his work. He brought into play as a costumer and costume shop supervisor the needs of the production as well as the needs of those in the shop who were experiencing stage costuming for the first time. He befriended many while also being a teacher and taskmaster of the very best sort. The work of the costume designer always looked better because Robbie had a hand in bringing the ideas to fruition. He was thoughtful, kind, and funny. He didn't say no very often, but he did give you the look, which seemed to carry more weight than no. Robbie was truly one of the good ones. I was very fortunate to have him as a friend and colleague. Robbie was a good person, a good human being. In my view of the world, one can't ask for more than that. The stars. So, my dear friend, I will always cherish the brightness and love you brought to this world and how you genuinely changed, informed, inspired my life and the many lives that crossed your path. You are a star in the heavens.
I know you all have many stories that you'll want and need to share at the reception, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I want to make a few closing remarks about Keith and his leadership, and obviously Marion being a really important part of that. I know that she wasn't chair, but she was there, and also Robbie. I just want to say, as a chair, and I know that the pandemic. We always talk about the pandemic, and the world obviously changed. And for our industry, it was a significant change. How do you tell students to keep on studying when the entire industry that they're passionate about is shut down? How do you keep? How do you say, no, this is a value? And sometimes, like now, we still have to remind students that, no, there's a future in this. This is a value. We are creating these citizens. Now, if you knew, which all of you did, Keith and Marion, you knew that passion. Again, I want to just not only look at this amazing space. This isn't built by someone who didn't believe that there was a future of this industry. You do not build a incredible limestone structure without knowing the purpose and the meaning it was, not just to those who were studying theater, but to all those students who came to see productions and would take theater classes and find a moment in their college experience that they would take with them. The reason I bring back the pandemic is because one of the things that Keith Michael did, and I'm not sure how many are aware of this, but as chair, I am aware of this, so I need you to know. One of the things that Keith Michael did when he began this department in its full glory, in golden age, started that, is that he created endowments and funds. When he built this building, he also created an endowment called the Lee Norvell Building Fund for emergencies. And those exist, and especially when this building is getting on at 25 years old. But during the pandemic, at a time when we could have no ticket revenue, And a lot of people stopped giving. And not because they wanted to stop giving, but they actually needed to. No one knew what was going to happen. We were able to continue on, not just eke by, but actually robustly create theater. Yes, a lot of it was on Zoom, sorry, but it was amazing. We were able to award scholarships. We were able to get hardware to students at home that could not have equitable access and afford hardware needed to be able to have Zoom classes and to do that work. All of this because of the foresight of Keith Michael. So it wasn't just the foundation of a department, it was the foundation of the future that he created. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that he did that. And I can only hope that I have done one inkling of something that will have an effect down in somewhere in the future. So to Keith and obviously Marion, I'm eternally grateful. I think their foundation has been what has sustained me here as long as I have, and what has brought so many of you back and so many that are streaming today, streaming this live. I had a lot of emails and texts from alumni during my time here that knew Robbie, and also those that knew Keith and Marion from a long time ago. And I'm so grateful for that. And I had an amazing conversation with several of you today, talking about potentially creating more alumni connection. And we need to do that, absolutely. And so that's something important because I know that Keith and Marion are that chain. They are part of that big chain that links us together. And the last thing I want to say about Robbie, and first I just want to acknowledge that if it were not for George's close relationship, it is a text that I received on a Sunday afternoon asking, have you heard from Robbie? And I realized that maybe I hadn't been as good a friend for the last few months as I thought I'd been. And I went and checked on Robbie, and that was the day that we learned that he was no longer with us. And again, we all need those people. And I'm so grateful for Robbie in my life. And I to share one little personal story to give you an idea. I was pregnant my first year here. And I went in to the hospital and delivered, and it was a C-section. I'm sorry to give you all that. Anyway, I share that. It's just important to the story. And so I had to stay there for a few days. And he was the first person, along with the Shakespeares, to come and visit me. And he brought with him something he'd been crocheting during my entire pregnancy, and I didn't know. I had only been here for a year. And it was the softest baby blanket, and all the lace was tatted around the edges. And that is what wrapped up my newborn child. His arms, literally. And I just want to say that during the pandemic, when my son was in high school and at home, I went into his bedroom and I had found him wrapped up in that. And so he was very close to my children. He was Uncle Robbie to them. Anyway, I am so grateful for these humans, and I'm so grateful to be in a place where we create these relationships, and in theater, in the arts, where we connect on the most human, collaborative level. And it is people like Keith and Marion, like I said, that they create the foundation upon which we link together over time. And every once in a while, you have those amazing people like Robbie that have several links over a long amount of time. So I leave you with my gratitude to all of you for being here. And those of you who are streaming, and for taking the time to remember them and to share your memories. And I would ask, as you go out, I hope that you're all going to join us up in the lobby for some light refreshments for a reception. And I please reintroduce yourself, introduce yourself, tell your stories. We need to hear them, because not everyone has a building that they can keep their memory alive, but their memories will always be alive in each one of us and passed down through our lineage as theater makers. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.